Good morning, Tribal Jazzman Scholar. I want to talk about a concept I think summed up in the words showing up. Sometimes in my work, in my job, in my profession, being a school teacher and having lots of kids every day who have different needs and demands, I can get overwhelmed. I can get a sense of, how am I going to do this? And the answer is just keep showing up to it. Showing up to your job, showing up to yourself, showing up to your commitments. And I had a story I wanted to share that, for me, is an amazing example that I got to see in my life of someone showing up. When I was in my 20s, I took work in northern Mexico. I created work for myself by founding a nonprofit organization where I would work in a very impoverished community, teaching nutrition, and I raised money and helped do some construction there, building a community center and a clinic. And this was a squatter settlement in northern Mexico outside the city of Mexicali. And it was a fairly large settlement, maybe 200, 300 families. And by squatter settlement, they had taken over land very quickly overnight, maybe 30 or 40 families initially. And the Mexican Constitution guarantees the right to have a home. It's one of the guarantees in the Mexican Constitution, and so people use that to make land invasions of government land, and they set up homes really quickly, and then it becomes very politically unfeasible to send police or military in and just take it all down because the negative publicity around that kind of a thing. If it's just a few families, they can do it, but if 30 or 40 families overnight set up a squat on government land, then generally over the years it'll eventually become legalized and become a community. So the community I was in had been legalized for about a year, and but it was right adjacent to the municipal dump, and there appeared to be very lax health standards because they would not only dump garbage, but they would dump the carcasses from the slaughterhouses, and it was just a nasty, nasty, nasty place, and it was probably maybe 40 acres of garbage. And hundreds of people would go there every day to scavenge for recyclables and maybe some food, clothing. And one of the women that I worked very closely with, Manuela, she had a 18-month-old baby, and I remember I went to visit her one evening, and she was running a very, very high fever. She had a terrible cough. She had tuberculosis, and it was acting up, and she was very sick. And she had a secondary bacterial infection. It was really unpleasant. And in the morning, I was getting up to go get water from a water drum, and I saw her walking down the road, and she had her digging stick, and she had a scarf around her head, and she had her baby on her back. And the digging stick was to go work in the dump, which was the stone's throw from where I was living. And I said, "Manuela, are you better?" And she said, "No." She said, "But I'll be okay." And I could see she was sweating. She just looked very, very sick. But off she went, 7 in the morning, to go dig in the dump with her baby on her back. She was showing up. And I always thought, if she could do that, if she could show up under those extremely adverse circumstances, I can show up. Because my life is much more privileged, and so sometimes those kind of experiences and examples for me, maybe for all of us, are the ones that help us kind of get through challenging times in our own lives. People are incredibly resilient, and Manuela was no exception. If in any way, she was one of the best examples of human resiliency and commitment and hard work and optimism. She just pushed through, and she got better. And but I remember thinking, man, I'd take a sick day. But she couldn't take a sick day. She had to scavenge for recyclables because every single penny counted in their family. So, Tribal Jazzman Scholar, thanks for joining me.